Thank you, Brother Claudio. It's a great joy for me to be with you tonight and to be welcome here in this convent, in this place in Istanbul. A great joy also to have this time to share with you a bit of this convent, the monastery of La Turrette, and how it is to live inside this place. So I'm going to speak with my terrible English, so I'm already apologize and hope it's gonna be fine for you. So of course I will also be maybe less precise than it should be, and I would be, but as maybe for a lot of you it's the first time you hear about this building or you see this building, it's going also to be interesting to have some aspect of it through also a lot of images. The place we are talking about is this convent in the middle of the countryside nearby Lyon, so built by Le Corbusier during the 50s, between 1953 for the first drawings to 1959 for the end of the construction. And I would like to start with two panels, two quotations. The first one is a famous one from Le Corbusier. I will say it in French first and then in English. L'architecture est le jeu savant, correct et magnifique des volumes sous la lumière. Des volumes ajustés, assemblés sous la lumière. In English, it's architectural emotion, or architecture is the learned game, correct and magnificent, of forms assembled in the light. It's a quotation from a book, a famous book from Le Corbusier from 1923, which is regarded as one of the main books about modern architecture, like the first stones of a theory of modern architecture. And another quotation, this time from a brother, from a Dominican friar, a father, named Père Couturier, Father Couturier. And he said about sacred art, sacred architecture, religious architecture, it's wiser to entrust such a task to geniuses without faith than to believers without talent. You may imagine, I don't know how you understand it in this context in Istanbul, but during the 50s in France, it was a very rude word to say that, something very shocking, very astonished to say. We prefer to ask to genius without faith sometime to have a good religious architecture instead of believers without talent. In fact, it's just a part of a larger quotation saying before of that, I always thought that to create good religious art, piece of art, we should have artists that are in the same time saints, holy saints. But as it is very difficult to find, I prefer to ask geniuses without faith rather than believers without talent. This conference is going to have 3 parts plus 1. The first one is the shock you may have when you arrive in La Turrette for the first time. Still today, people that come to this convent for the first time, they start to be a bit astonished, even sometimes really disappointed. And even for me, who live in this convent since quite a long time now, it's still a question. Then the second part is going to be, I say, living machine. Le Corbusier say machine à habiter. Machine à habiter. A machine in which you can live in. But in English it's a bit strange. So I say, let's say, living machine. And Le Corbusier sacred space. And I will finish by a third part, which is an eloquent place. It's important for an order, the Dominican order, which is an order of preachers. We are dedicated to predication, and it's why I think we are still in this place nowadays. It's that this architecture, despite the fact that it's very strange in many ways, it's an architecture which speaks, which is eloquent, which says something in a very strong way. And we're going to perhaps just say a few things of this. And to finish this little introduction, I would just remind you that it's very difficult, and maybe more for modern architecture, to speak about it if you're not in it. Because architecture here is more or less something you have to walk through, to walk inside. It's not just pictures. So tonight I'm gonna show you pictures, but it's just a little taste, maybe not the best one, to start to understand or find what is it about now. And I start with the more difficult picture of the convent. I decide it's the first thing you see when you arrive, and it's this. And it's believed to be a church. So first time you come in La Turrette, it's astonishment, even a shock. When once arrive at La Turrette, at the end of a tree-lined path, the buildings comes into view in a very powerful and strong way. You've got this raw concrete, this very brutalist kind of material, and you may maybe start to think what this could be. It's very unexpected in many ways, monumental, a bit alien. Its appearance evokes more an industrial plant or an electrical substation than a monastery. It is said that the main material of La Turrette is concrete. But in fact, step by step, we are going to discover that the light is maybe the main material of the convent. And it's what Le Corbusier used to say. This convent of raw concrete is a work of love. It lives from within. It's inside that the essential take places. When you see the other part of the building, you can see that each facade of the building is very different. And this one is a facade looking to the countryside, and it's where Le Corbusier drew his first drawings for the convent. He decided the place, because the place wasn't decided before him, and in 1953, the first time, he came and drew a line on the top of the hill. And you've got this line. He say, I start my building from the sky, directly linked with the mountain around. And the building is going to touch the floor when the columns are going to touch it. And that gives a very strange shape in this building that seems to start from the top and is less and less, in a way, substantial when it is connected to the ground. When you arrive in this building, in fact, you start with the smaller levels, just 3 levels higher. Whereas if you're in the opposite side of the slope, downstairs, you may see 6 levels, something like that. So this gives you a very different impression of this building. And the south facade of the building is in a way leading you to the landscape. It's a bit like a boat, un paquebot. It's a famous image in the book of Le Corbusier, Vers une architecture, toward an architecture, saying that modern architecture should find new shapes, new forms in the boats, in the planes, in the cars that we start to build at that time. And saying that we have to get a bit rid of just the eternal triangle of the Greek architecture. And so step by step, he tried to find a new way to build with industrial architecture, of course, but also with going to a very medieval time architecture from the Cistercian, for example, architecture south of France. We will see then some example of this. And when you arrive in the convent, you have even a bridge leading you to the building in order to say in a very strong way that this building is like a boat, a bit disconnected from the nature around. And Le Corbusier say to the brothers, leave all the space around as it was before. So you remove the building and you're in an 18th century landscape, because the convent has been built in a place where you have a castle, a chateau from a very old time. And he took the level of the path, this 3-laned path, as the main level of all the convent. At the entrance of the building, you've got a square, 2.26 meters by 2.26 meters. And this shape, this measurement, is the one of the modular, which is the precise measurement that Le Corbusier used in all of his architecture. It's a link between the human body and the golden ratio, le nombre d'or, the golden number I don't know in English, I think it's golden ratio, which is thin as a good proportion coming, we say it sometimes, from nature, but very used during the Renaissance time period in Europe. And this ratio said that using this golden ratio, you're going to have a nice shaped rectangle. And he starts by this square, and then he uses this measurement in all the building. It's a man, or a woman, but it's a man of 1.83 meters. And when you have your handed, it's 2.26. And you will have also the same measurement in this direction, 1.83. So you are in a square like the Homme de Vitruve, the man of the Vitruve man you may know. And so this gives you the shape of all the building, and step by step he built the building from the outside to the inside. Look, first you have a door, but it's a door without door. You have just the shape, the frame, and you're going through the frame, and then you've got the ground. You've got the ground, but not even a ceiling. And then the ground and the ceiling is coming. And then a little door, a red little door, which seems to be an interior door, because you're already inside, in a way, already inside the architecture. And something very strange happens when you do this promenade architectural, this architectural path, walking. It's that you let the nature around you, the nature around you, and you will find a city inside, in somehow. That's something very strange for us as Dominican, because usually the Dominicans, we live within the cities, in the cities. And the nature is a little square inside our monastery. Some nature, maybe here it's almost that. And you know, the Dominican convent, they are never a nice shaped square like that, because we are in the cities, and so you have a little church, then some building, then some courtyard, then another building. Here maybe it's the more perfect Dominican convent or priory in that way, because it's always a mixed, because of urbanist, the urbanism all around. Here you have something different, because there is no city outside. In a way, Le Corbusier put the city inside, and the nature is around. So it's an inversion of what should be or could be a Dominican convent. Inside you're going to see different shapes, and that helps you probably to, I want to give you them in a more clear way, to remember that Le Corbusier say that architecture is five main points. You've got the free plan, you've got the pilotis, the pils, the free facade, the roof garden, and the ribbon windows. It's these windows that are horizontal windows and not vertical ones, saying that also our eyes are horizontal, and why not having sometimes horizontal windows and not just vertical ones. In fact, what happened? The main things to remind from the modern architecture in Le Corbusier's building is the use of the beams and the piers. This is something we have sometimes in the architecture, of course, but it's something very new in a way that because the structural things come through the piers, the pilotis, the columns, the facade can be removed. There is no more structural needs for the facade. You can remove it completely. Now we are used to that because if you see the towers we build all around in our modern cities, most of the time we use these ideas of modern architecture. Piers, beams, and then free facade. You can put a full facade or you can remove it, have an empty place or use glasses as you want. And so that's also why the windows don't need anymore to be narrow but can be very long, because you don't have to have the charges going down from the top to the ground. So yes, so free plan, free facade, roof garden, that's coming from also this Mediterranean architecture. And let's say, to be simple, that Le Corbusier is creating modern architecture from Mediterranean architecture. Living Machine and Le Corbusier Sacred Space. When the Dominican brothers asked Le Corbusier to build their convent, it was a time where they are building in France 3 new big convents. One in north of France, Lille, one in Lyon, where Le Corbusier is going to work, and one in Toulouse, very south of France, because there was 3 provinces, 3 parts of the country. It's divided in 3 places, and they need 3 studies place for the student, for the brothers that are starting philosophy, theology, in order to become priests and preachers. Just a picture of one in north of France. You maybe don't know, but is very interesting too. It's a building from Pinsard, Pierre Pinsard. It's from also the same time as the convent of La Turette. So you have 3 main pieces of architecture, but of course La Turette is the one in this competition between brothers who win because of the well-known of Le Corbusier. When the brothers asked him to build a convent for them, they didn't ask to a young starting architect, but they asked to someone very famous. So they know they want someone famous, and they ask to someone famous. And it's Father Couturier, you see him with Le Corbusier, who was in charge to try this to happen. Because Le Corbusier is from a Christian family, but is not a believer it's always difficult to say who is believer or not, but he is not someone who practices faith in a strong way, and is from, in Christian world, what we name Protestant, the Protestant world, so quite far from the Catholic Church at that time. And it's even something a bit crazy in the 50s to ask for the Catholic Church to a Protestant to build a church for monks. So it's also a way to connect the different religions or different churches. And Father Couturier is in charge of, at that time, an important magazine. named L'Art Sacré, Sacred Art. He is the director of this magazine, and this magazine work in order to help Christian people, but to help involve in their taste or to have a better artistic taste. In order to, so it's the idea of an education of the way you see, you look at the things. During this 20s, 30s time. And one of the most important things is to help people to look to the simple historical architecture. Saying, be careful, this is very interesting kind of architecture. It's masterpiece of art. And even if at that time we build this kind of church, please don't destroy these little ones. And in the same time, it's a criticism, a strong criticism of this kind of huge modern architecture of the 30s that in a way is a bit too emphatic. It's a bit too strong. And know that that's happened after the Second World War, and France at that time was in a quite bad condition, quite poor. And it's also the idea that we shouldn't make too much money for things that in a very strong way are not very powerful in the history of architecture. There was a kind of décalage, I don't know how to say that in English, un retard. The church is no longer in advance in sacred architecture, whereas in the past it used to be always also the church that leads architecture, you know? When in the past, it's the church asked to the masters of that time, but during the 30s or the 40s in France, actually, I don't know exactly how it was in other places, but the church asked to second level architects or artists, but is a bit ashamed of the most famous one. So it's also this idea that we should ask to the living master of a time and not to be afraid of the living art or living architecture. And so this is typically the way the magazine try to help people to see the things. You know, very poor kind of things with two interesting pictures, a black part, a white part, this kind of diagonal. So even the shape of the magazine is designed to help people to start to see things a bit different way. And that leads to three main buildings in France that are directly connected to le couvent de la Turette, la Turrette Priory. The first one is Assisi, which is the very first church with modern art inside in France. Then Vence, with the creation of Matisse, the famous painter Henri Matisse, and then Ronchamp, the first church of Le Corbusier. So Le Corbusier designed a church previously to the one. Assisi, it's this kind of modern glass style, which was with Saint Veronique and the Christ, and at that time that was considered as something terribly ugly for quite a part of the Catholic or the people in France. So it was very shocking to put stained glasses like this one in a church. Nowadays, maybe not anymore. But it means that the taste, the way we see things change a bit. Then you've got, of course, Vence, which is a very powerful church, little church, a chapel from Matisse for the Dominicans, nuns, for sisters. And so it's the second church and the very first that an artist worked on it as a whole thing. Matisse wasn't an architect, but worked on it. And then Ronchamp, in which you can see how Le Corbusier inspired itself from the Roman time architecture, from the Cistercian architecture with big walls and just few light coming through walls that seems very big. And these walls are in fact built with stones and not concrete, even if there is concrete to finish the whole project. So Le Corbusier starts the building. I'm going a bit quicker. The construction starts in 1956 from the ground to the top. All the building is on piles except the church, which is directly connected to the ground. And in a way, in this building, the church is going to the top, to the sky, directly to the ground. So that's also something quite powerful around the idea of incarnation, something going to the sky, to the ground, from the sky to the ground. And you see also some workers on the pyramid of the building. We will talk about it in a few minutes. Here, Le Corbusier with the brothers during the construction of the building. And you see the panel ondulation facade. Sorry for the translation. La façade pan-ondulatoire. It's an unusual word to say a facade that is moving in a way. And the facade is like, you know, the accordion, the musical things, and it sees this specific facade. It sees as the most strong way to design a free facade. Because at the beginning, Le Corbusier do facades that are very calm and in a way not very dynamic. But this facade, which has been so many times, then it has been, you have so many copies of it in so many universities around the world, but it's the very first time something like this, in this dynamic way, is doing in such a strong, powerful way. You had that before with the Bauhaus architecture, but here it's this kind of tension between concrete and glass. So the convent is finished, and even it was not completely finished. The inside reveals how strong the light works inside of the building, with the columns, with the light. And that reminds what L'Art Sacré, this famous magazine, said, saying that religious architecture is always connected in a way with the profane one, but the sacred architecture is taking the profane one in a direction that makes it specific. But there is no strong boundaries in kind of way. At least in France, for example, you can have either farms or convent built with almost the same kind of architecture. And the magazine do the comparison between Greek temple and old churches from the Middle Age, Roman churches, or even comparison between Ban, I think, barrage, and the stairs of an ancient theater. And La Tourette, not even finished, start to be compared with this kind of very powerful architecture. And it's interesting that we are here to talk about that, because you see that it's, in a way, another world, something completely different. So if you try to compare this kind of architecture with this one, it's quite hard, because this architecture works also with decorative things in a very strong way, whereas the architecture of that time and Le Corbusier architecture is more or less a huge sculpture in which you live. But sometimes it's sculptural, like this, without columns. You don't even understand how it works, it works. And sometimes it's the exact opposite. Here in the church, the walls are structural. The frame, you need the frame, you can't remove the walls, otherwise the ceiling is going to fall down. But here, it's the exact opposite in the refectory, the place to eat. Because it's the columns that are the structural things, but the facade, you can remove it. That's also the very strong power of Le Corbusier architecture, going from one to another place, statement, two kinds of architecture in a way. So with the brothers, the refectory, the corridors. And so, the general shape of the building is connected to Le Toronnet Abbey, which is a Cistercian building. Why I say that? Because it's Father Couturier who say to Le Corbusier, before to draw anything, you should go to Le Toronnet. There, in this abbey, you're going to see a very powerful architecture, very far from the bourgeois architecture we are living in our cities. Bourgeois, I don't know how to translate it. The very established architecture, kind of your very wealthy architecture, and saying that how to talk about poverty of the gospel in such kind of place. So that was also a question in that time. This going back to the Cistercian architecture, so that's a very nice abbey. I'm grown just nearby, in middle of France. So it's exactly the kind of architecture that was the roots of Le Corbusier reflection. With this kind of simple spaces, look at the difference between where we are. So it's two churches, of course, but working in two different ways. This one works more with light and materialities and the stones, and in La Tourette it's light and concrete. Concrete is more difficult than this. But here it's another way to work. A bit less with light and a bit less with original materials, that you don't see the original materials because everything is painted. The shape, the general shape of the convent of La Turrette is the shape of a usual monastery. I'm going quicker. Here you've got the shape of le couvent de la Turrette, and here of the monastery. The church in La Turrette is disconnected, separated from the three other buildings, in order to say that the sacred place should be a bit away. That's something a bit unusual, because usually the church is more fully connected with the other buildings. And you have three levels in the convent. Intellectual life is the levels where you enter in. When you enter the building, you enter by the intellectual level, the same as the path outside of the convent. It's where you have the university, the place, classrooms to teach the monks, the future priest. Classrooms, conference room, like tonight. You have also library, a big library with 50,000 books. And so you have this kind of little university for 80 brothers. So it's quite a lot. On the top, you have individual life with lower, high. And you have 100 rooms, we name cells, little rooms for each monks. And down the communal life, the church, the refectory, and the chapter room, salle du chapitre. The intellectual level, I'm already explaining you what it is. Yes, it's also interesting about this sacred architecture that on each level, so that's in coupe, a cut, a straight cut, not a plan. On each level, in red, I've put the sacred spaces. So it means at each level, you have a place for the prayer. Near the rooms, it's the balcony. On the intellectual level, it's the oratory with this amazing pyramidal shape. And on the ground, it's the church and the crypt. This is the interior of the oratory, with two added sculpture, but you see how simple it is. In a way, it's that time in the church that we try to have less object everywhere, to have something more simple, maybe just a cross or just a little sculpture. But it's more the architecture, more or less, that gives the most power of it. Then the cells. The cells are all connected and looking to the nature. That's something very clever and interesting. There is no rooms, no bedrooms looking to the inside of the courtyard. It's all outside. With for each room a balcony, a little place to go outside, to see the nature, but also where you can pray. And I have to say that it's very strong and very powerful to have this little place. We're going to see it in a moment. And the idea of having all the rooms looking outside and not inside is coming from a Carthusian monastery, la Chartreuse d'Emma, la Chartreuse de Galuzzo, in Florence, Firenze. And you see that here you've got the corridors, but all the little houses of the monks are looking to the nature. There is no possibility for the monks to look to the courtyard. And this gives an impression of freedom in a way. This is the inside of the little balcony with a little square that reminds the one of the entrance, but it's also the place where you can put a figure, a cross, a leaf, a stone, something you want to look at and have a place to rest and to pray. So it's these little things, and the cells you see are very tiny, and it's like corridors leading you to the nature. The windows here disappear. There is no frame, so you don't see the windows. It seems that there is no glass. There is a glass, in fact, but it disappears. And you have, so that's the view from my room. That's good. Even if here we can have very nice view, thanks to Galata Tower and toward all this, the whole Istanbul. But you've got this amazing view looking to the nature in a very deep way. So the nature is a real frame for your windows. It's not, you don't have the nature painting on a wall, but you have this as your main painting. It's a live painting. And the church, the last level, with the chapter room, the place where we discussed how to live together. So it's the place for the community body. You've got the refectory, which is the place for the physical body, and the spiritual life with the church. And they are all connected through corridors that are doing more or less a cross, and all together in the atrium. The refectory nowadays, and the church, very empty. You know, there are two ways to talk about God in the history of architecture, if we want. Either you fulfill a place to say God is here in many ways, and thanks to gold, thanks to nice drawings or nice sculpture, you say a bit of what is sacred space, but there are also this idea of having a huge empty space, saying because it's huge, God can fulfill it, but it's not us who take part of it. We are not having the hand on Him. I'm finished in 10 minutes. Is it okay? Perfect. To finish, I want to just to say a few words about an eloquent place with 4 main ideas. That this building is talking of enclosure and freedom, talking about tradition and modernity, poverty and light, and drama and resurrection. Enclosure and freedom. I hope the traductors are not completely, no, this seems to be okay. Enclosure and freedom, it's this idea that the convent is like a frame, so it can feel like a prison in some way. And for French hearers, there are many words that you say, but that's what we use for a prison. Cells, refectory, porterie, what we name porterie at the entrance, etc. But in fact, there are many ways that this frame is in a way open to other direction. First, it's something I haven't talked already, is that the convent is a bit, the monastery is a bit like a sandwich, and to the top you are linked with the sky, and to the ground with the earth. To the top, you've got the garden, the garden which is the cloister for the monks to pray. So they have a little stair, very tiny one, to go to the top, and thanks to that they can reach this garden in a very Dominican way. That means just a fields, empty fields with the grass growing in very any direction. But actually it's such an interesting and nice place to be in. And it's even more powerful because you have this concrete inside and the nature you're looking at, and you open and you go to these little tiny stairs and you're in the middle of the fields, in the middle of the nature, towards sky and nature. And there are just few things that are connecting you to the other part of the building, like this pyramid that remind also ancient time. And you see also, so here you've got the cloister on the roof, and here it's the cloister of deambulation, circulation, to go to one place to one another, as a normal, a usual cloister is for. Inside, I've already talked about that. You have also so many little houses that give an impression of freedom, and often the architects have done copies of Le Corbusier ideas, but they misunderstood this idea of freedom. If you don't have if you remove all these little things, you're gonna have just this modern, sad building we can have in our cities sometimes. This kind of, what we name in French, HLM, this very sad building of the suburbs, because there is no life anymore. So that's very important to understand what Le Corbusier tried to do. He's doing very straight things and very gridded in many ways. But in so much way, he is doing freedom and liberty that reopen when things seems to be too narrow, too tight, too sad in many ways. For example, this is under the building, and it's not anymore the straight columns of the beginning, but something different. Why? We almost don't know. It's sometimes is more a sculptor than a mechanical guy. But he needs the both things. Sometimes it's very gridded, and sometimes something new happens. It's the same here. Look at the shape here. It's like a drawing, but it takes so much time to create such a wall that is not straight at all. And this is 3 windows. And these little things, you could find it in a monastery from the 11th century in south of France, but in stone, of course. But it's exactly the same shape than what you could find maybe here in some mosque, or you see something going outside just for the water, without what the pipes we invent or we use later. These 3 windows. One is going a bit outside. Cannon, light cannon. No. And at the top, as an opening, the bells. I was very interested because a few years ago I saw some drawings of Le Corbusier, and this is a drawing he has done during the 20s. And this is the plan of La Chapelle de Ronchamp. But there are 30 years between these two drawings. One first, and 30 years later, he has done this. And look how, in a way, they are connected. And the shape, final shape, it's this. Freedom. Tradition and modernity. Le Corbusier was very impacted by few tours around Europe, east of Europe, and we have amazing drawings. I should have bring them, and now I realize amazing building of Istanbul, of course, by Le Corbusier. You should show these drawings. Of Athens also, it was a shock for him to discover the mosques, the Parthenon also, these Greek temples. And that's the moment he realized, he said, yes, emotional architecture, emotion is the, I haven't the word here, but I will find them back, is the precise and splendid interplay of volumes composed under the light. And here it's a mosque from the Valley du Mzab in Algeria. And he was very impressed. And this is very connected in many ways with what you can see with this kind of wall, very tiny kind of wall, not something impressive, something very simple, very calm, very connected to the human body, not emphasis too much, not emphatic too much, but with these little windows that remain what's happened in this kind of architecture nearby the desert. The other tradition, of course, is le Toronnet. Why it's connected with this Toronnet Abbey? Because of this idea of objects that are connected together, volumes that play with the sun. And of course it's completely different, but in many ways he tried to connect these two ideas, the modern form with the ancient, trying to make bridge. It's the same with the windows, with the slope inside the window, inside the building, like in some ancient monasteries. With the little windows, even if the concrete is very thin, he put the windows to the sky in order to, from the inside, give the impression of a very big wall, very heavy wall. Poverty and light. The raw concrete, the white painting, few grass or épis de blé growing up. Very few things. This little strange shape, which is named in French, and Le Corbusier named it morceau de sucre, piece of sugar you put in your coffee to drink it. So it's also part of the poetic of the building. And why Le Corbusier is so strong in what he has done is because he is a painter, a sculptor, an architect, but also a very good writer. And he succeeded to give all his main ideas with very interesting articles or books that explain why he is a master in theory of architecture nowadays still. Because you have many architects that are very bad to talk. Again, the work of the light and in the cells. very simple things happening with the nature. In the church also, and to the crypt. And I finished with a few pictures about what we name drama and resurrection. There was almost no cross in the building. Very simple in many ways. But he tried to talk about what is the dramatic thing in a religion. Christian, Islam, there are something strong coming about our life that are so tiny toward God in many ways. And for the Christian, he worked with also this door. It's the door leading to the church. And this door, it's a huge panel that you can move. It looks sometimes like the door of a boat. And when you open it, the door crosses a window and across a pier. And that's the kind of very interesting but unexpected things you can have in this building. You open the door crosses a window, and you've got an image, something, maybe a volunteer image. Who knows? In the church, the altar is quite powerful, and at the beginning, Le Corbusier wants to have white things all inside of the church. So the church completely white. But the brothers, they have not enough money to finish. And Le Corbusier, during the inauguration of the building, the consecration of the church, say, okay, that's strong enough. It's even more strong than to have white all inside. We let like this. So he has also to move from what he wants to do. And you saw also all the little altars and this light cannon we saw from the outside. This circle, like, comment on appelle ça? Auréole, like light around a scent you can put in, and that gives an impression, an incredible impression. When you are in the crypt, you don't know if the light is coming to you or toward you. It's difficult to understand how it works. And it seems not modern anymore. It's more like a huge sculpture in many ways. I'm going to finish Le Corbusier with the brothers looking to the building almost finished. And I want to say some words from a brother. I will conclude with the words of a student brother from that time. Our convent will remain on this hill, immersed in nature, hermetic to all those who come to feast on modernism or succumb to a patient snobbery. But to others, to those capable of understanding that Le Corbusier's work is less mean to be shown as a spectacle than to be lived from within, it joyfully reveals itself as it is, in the brilliance of true tradition, all allowed with youth, challenging academicism and schoolroom lessons to reach to reach the splendor of freedom. Thank you very much.